That's your big Susan.
Oh, sorry. Taken over. When I'm sharing, could I have 3 meters?
I was supposed to catch up with Stephen on
Yes,
Friday, and that
I'm
didn't happen. I had to pull out
organising
of
a
that.
meeting with all the people that he's supposed to have met, Anna too,
Okay.
and
cool.
I'll join as well. Good, good. You right?
Yeah.
Just get over get the tightening up. No, you're right. No. Right, good morning everybody. I would now like to open the Finance and Audit Committee of the 19th of August. First up, I'd just like to advise that this meeting has been recorded and will be on the Council's website. I will now do the health safety. So you will be aware that this is a COVID-2 level meeting. And so just we've got hand sanitisers. We are to be 1 metre distance and public are to be 2 metres social distancing. So just be aware of that. And I'll just go through the procedures for this venue. So male and female toilets are both on the ground floor and the first floor of the venue, and there's disability toilets out the back there as well. The Palmerston North Conference and Function Centre is a non-smoking facility. Smokers are encouraged to use the back exit doors and to smoke at least 5 metres away from these doors. A first aid kit is available in the main office. A defibrillator is available on the ground floor foyer next to the unisex toilets. Please make sure you're aware of all the positions of all the emergency exits and evacuation procedures which are on display on the exit points. In case of an emergency, please exit through your nearest marked door. Assembly points, if exiting from the front of the building, your assembly point is on the lawn located at the front of the building. At the back, if you're going through the back, it's at the back of the car park at the rear of the building. And a safety warden and venue staff will be on site to assist. And if all else fails, follow Hannah and myself. So that covers the health and safety. We will now do apologies. Do I have any apologies? No, that's great. And additional items, you will have all received a copy, and thank you for pointing out that the commentary at the bottom was missing, so you've all been given that piece of paper. That's why you've got it. And also there is an additional map for when we have public comment. So that's for the Greens Road item. So I'll now move on to declaration of interest. Is there any declaration of interest?
Madam Chair, I just want to note that I do have an interest with Homes for People for item 9, but I don't believe it's a conflict, but I just want to disclose that.
That's fine, that will be noted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, we now move on to item number 4, which is public comment. So I will invite Brad Newcoop to the front of the, and Brad will be talking on item number 8, Greens Road. So just when you're ready, Brad.
Cool, thank you. Just a quick introduction. Yeah, my name is Brad Newcoop. So I'm born and bred Manawatu, Palmerston North based. Just my background is construction, industry and architecture, and I've been in that industry 15 years in the Manawatu. Sort of purchased a portion of the family farm recently, which is this picture, part of this picture that you see here, which we've sort of been working alongside council and the Te Aroa walking track to do a temporary walking track diversion off Greens Road while electrics have been upgrading the road and having trucks through there recently. Yeah, that's sort of the picture that you see on that drawing there. That's an already existing track that's in use now for the Te Aroa walkers. So my dream and vision, sort of, I wanted to try and explain today for the land, which complements and extends from the potential purchase of this track, is I'm looking to support and complement the existing sort of recreational activities that are happening out in the Kuruwara Valley. So at the moment, there's sort of the national walking track, the mountain bike park, and hiking and just general outdoor activities that are happening out in that Manawatu sort of adventure part of the area. Yeah, sort of wanting to try and make the Manawatu more of a desirable destination for the locals and for out-of-towners to come and visit and enjoy when they do come here, and hopefully working with everyone to help create a well-managed recreational asset for the Māori Manawatu. So my intentions are sort of to provide a sort of high-end accommodation, and I guess a sort of a bit of a playground for myself in construction and architecture, and writing and things like that with what I do out on the farm. So I mean, these sort of ideas, this all been tossed around with potential campsites and potential accommodation, whether it's glamping and Also, maybe even a commercial space that may complement the already existing pretty busy Arapuki mountain bike park, and whether that involves a hire shop or a workshop or cafe or wherever that might be, to sort of support the growing movement out there in the valley. Just generally complement what's kind of happening out there. I've collated a bit of a team to kind of help me on this journey. So far my team consists of myself, Alan Titchener, a landscape architect. I think he's working on Anzac Parade at the moment, or Anzac Pork Chop Hill, sorry. Ryan O'Leary is a senior planner who's at Property Group at the moment, and also my architect, Steve McDonald from Design Group in Stapleton Elliott. So the goal is to sort of work in with council to and to gain like the required land use consents that are needed to do something with my land, which collates with the potential purchase of the walking track and what's happening today. So sort of create a community and leisure activity area, and be a part of the up and coming, and also be a part of some of the up and coming Manawatu events, and to sort of generally complement what's already happening out there. Just be a part of the whole sort of Palmy Proud movement. I understand that sort of today is not necessarily going to grant me a resource consent, but I just wanted to put it out there to the opportunity to say a few words and hopefully get pointed in the right direction to do so. I guess I just generally want to be a part of making the Manawatu a better place, and I see the opportunity of being able to do that through my small piece of land that I've got out in the valley. Thank you for your time, and that's all.
Okay, thank you, Brad. Looks like there's some great opportunities there. Are these councillors that may wish to ask you any questions just before you leave? Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Brad. Just the paper that's coming to us has an option in it around whether we go with an easement or go with a purchase. Just wondering if you had a view on that.
I've had advice probably more to go with the likes of the purchase. And there is one little spot in particular that I wouldn't mind an easement for myself to gain access through. But I'd probably be more likely or more towards the purchase than an easement, I've been advised. So, yeah.
Great.
Okay,
thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other councillors? No, that's fine. Thank you very much, Brad. Now, before we vote, we just have a technology glitch. We haven't got a card for Mr. Armstrong. So what we're going to do, we're still going to electronic vote. And at the end of the vote, when that has come in, we will just ask Mr. Armstrong how he's voted. So it's just a little workaround. These things happen. So I will move that the public comment be received. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Naylor. And are there any comments? There being none, we will go to vote. And your vote, Mr. Yes, so that is carried unanimously. We will now move on to item number 6, confirmation of the minutes. I'm happy to move the minutes as approved, and thank you, Councillor Naylor has second. Is there any comment? No, we will go to vote. And your vote, yes, so that is carried 16 votes with 1 abstention. So we now move on to item number 6. which is the Human Resources and Health and Safety and Wellbeing Report. And we have Alan Downs presenting that report. And welcome, Alan. It's the first time you've presented here, so people please be kind. I just want to make a comment that there are some items in that report that should have other councillors have requested that they're missing, and I'll take responsibility for that. I oversaw the report and I should have picked up that they were missing, and we've been doing a transition from audit and finance, and we've got different staff, so please, it's just the way it is. So any information that's not on that report that you want, we will go ahead to do it. So when you're ready, Alan.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
And
we'll just acknowledge that we're taking the paper as read, and Alan will talk to some of the key points on that. Thank you for acknowledging that this is Alan's first time reporting to Finance and Audit after just over a month, which is Alan's position, and the fact that he's here is a clear, visible demonstration of PNCC's commitment to improving its health and safety performance, keeping our people safe physically, emotionally and mentally. And Alan will have some comments to share on the reporting period, but more pertinently on what we're doing going forward, if that's of interest to you, Madam Chair.
okay, thank you very much for that.
Okay. I have the report in front. With the report in front of me, it is a little bit different than you've previously had. And we are open and flexible for any more changes that may come up as a result as well. But it's laid out a little bit differently. You'll see there's key point summary, which should help the councillors understand briefly what's in the report. A lot of the normal stuff is still there regarding the actual tables. So although this report is for April to June 2020, the actual tables show the information does go to at least a year as well, backwards. In this report, you'll see a major emphasis on critical risk, and the critical risk table has been placed there. Critical risks were started to be identified in 2017 after a lot of work done through the HR department, and also working with other elements of the business. And also you'll see following that, the critical risk incident. So the focus being on critical risk, which is a governance component. It'd be very important for the councillors to understand there's a strong responsibility around actually understanding critical risks and ensuring that the critical risks are being addressed appropriately. And so this report is moving to more emphasis on that particular area. Then you'll see the table following that with the critical risks that we've identified in the last 12 months that have come up, that have not just been critical risks by their identity or their status, but also because the consequence levels were at a level that we put them in as well. There's also elements in here regarding the HR report. Thank you. I'm ready to take any questions.
I will let Councillor Johnson go first, as she had some questions about the content of the report. And then over to you, Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Alan and Patrick, for the report. So you touched on the fact that we haven't had any reporting of health and safety formally to this committee since August last year. And although, as you say, some of the tables do include those figures, I wonder if you could explain to us, and I appreciate that you're new in the role, but could you explain to us why that is? And more importantly, what's the intention going forward with regards to health and safety reporting?
Madam Chair, I would say our intention, as I understand it, is Finance and Audit would request that we report, Madam Chair, on a quarterly basis. There's no change to that intention from my perspective or from Alan's perspective. We're absolutely going to be responsive to providing you with the information that is most pertinent to you. And you would have heard, Madam Chair, of the, I guess, shift in reporting focus on critical risks as opposed to general health and safety activity. The rationale for that is consistent with, I would say, most organisations, if not every organisation, following the introduction of the most recent Health and Safety at Work Act. And the reason for that focus is to make sure that all of the council's resources are directed on preventing those incidents from happening that have the most significant consequence to people. And as again, my perspective would be that is consistent with leading practice. It is very consistent with making sure that we avoid, as far as is possible, the situation where our people have a serious incident which has a serious consequence to them. But in short, Madam Chair, no change to my understanding, which is quarterly reporting, and very happy to be guided to include information that is pertinent to you in future.
Thank you, Patrick. Sorry, I understood that you answered the second part of that question about the intention going forward, but given that we haven't had a formal report on the 9 months preceding April 2020, what has happened to that information? Has it been reported internally? Will we be able to get an updated
Absolutely.
report?
There's been no change which has eroded the integrity of the reporting information. So that information can be made available, and if it's acceptable, at the next report, I'm happy to do a particular focus on the rolling 12-month period, if that's of use.
Yes, thank you,
Yes.
Patrick. That is,
Yeah,
Yep.
that would be great. Thank
and
you.
we will put that on the work schedule.
So just moving on to the aspects or the indicators that are not on this report that have been on previous reports. And certainly I'm not suggesting that the report would never evolve, but there are some important indicators that are not on this report that we had requested beyond previous reports. And they are things like the number of lost time days, the number of lost long-term injuries, the types of health and safety training that were occurring rather than just the number of events, the number of investigations, the completed recommendations of previous investigations, and the follow-up to the formal external review that was done in April 2018. So I did, and I assume that you have got that in the email that I sent to the chair, but is there any reason why that couldn't be included in future reports?
That information is collected. In terms of the information that's in this report, my understanding was that reflected some feedback on some information that was previously felt not that relevant, but that understanding could be a misunderstanding of mine. There's no reason why we cannot include that information in future reports.
Okay, sorry, I'm just having a bit of difficulty hearing you, Patrick, if you're able to.
Sorry.
Thank you. So there's a commitment to be able to include that in future reports.
There's no, absolutely. There's
Okay.
That information is there. That information is reported on operationally, and certainly has a lot of relevance operationally. And there's nothing to prohibit us from bringing it here if that's what you desire.
Well, I think I certainly desire that, and I sense that will be what a number of elected members would like to see. I particularly want to see focus on, sorry, I'm getting to comment, beg your pardon. So my final question is about manual handling. So in previous reports, manual handling injuries had been a big percentage of the cause of lost days in terms of work and in terms of chronic long-term injuries. And we had asked, and there had been a commitment given, in fact, in the August meeting 2019, that the manual handling would be that there would be additional training on manual handling, and that it would be the effectiveness of that training would be monitored, and the number of manual handling incidents would be have a special light shone on them. And I suspect that that's just been lost in the changeover of personnel, but certainly I wonder, is that could we request that manual handling training be a separate line in the report until we can see that we've got an improvement in those long-term injuries?
Yes, that's possible. the update I do have on manual handling, though, is that the numbers are reducing. In fact, there's only one recorded incident in the last 6 months. So, but we can obviously update that report for you.
If I just may interrupt, Councillor, that information I will make sure as chair that's in that report. And I'd just like to add that there's no reflection on the staff that this has been. I'll take responsibility that that information, I went through the report with them and I made some decisions on what should be in there and what shouldn't because it was a new report. So blame me if it's not on there. I'm more than happy to put anything back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, I'm not looking to blame anyone.
No, but I'm just
looking to have the information reported to council.
And that's what we'll make sure is done.
Thank you.
Okay.
And just a little update on manual handling. If we get trends taking place from a particular business unit, and we can identify that through incident reporting, we'll bring in something like an occupational therapist who will come and assess what's taking place, the stresses in the business, so we can actually make strategic decisions around how to train those folk, not just in the general manual handling lifter box type scenario.
Right, thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'll hand over to someone else now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Ellen and Patrick. Just two questions. One is around under the critical risks, the incident relating to violence. I just wondered if you could give us an update on that one.
Okay, so you're talking about the armour guard scenario?
I don't know what it is.
Okay, yeah, that's the one. Okay, so the assault was, I mean, it could have been much worse. That's the reality. He was taken to the hospital. He had treatment. He was released within about 3 hours. So it wasn't severe. It wasn't like life-threatening. There's been a full investigation by Armour Guard, and they're obviously following through with retraining of the person because a number of basic behaviours were substandard on that particular day. So at this particular point in time, the person he wasn't seriously hurt, etc. So it could have been much worse, but it wasn't.
Okay.
Madam Chair, may I just add to that? So just a reminder that this incident was an employee of a third party that we contract to provide service. The investigation response is led by their organisation, and we, through our PCBU responsibilities, make sure that information comes back to us. So as we can satisfy ourselves that the people that are undertaking the work on our behalf have the right systems and training in place to prevent this incident from happening and minimise the consequences should it happen. And the dominant feelings in the third party's report, as Alan said, related to behavioural. They were not using the correct procedures nor the correct.
So it's just, I'm sorry to interrupt, Patrick, were our staff in danger at any time during the incident?
In this particular incident, not anybody employed in PNCC, but again, under the PCBU relationship, the person was undertaking work.
So maybe in the descriptor, it maybe should put that, because it didn't read like that. It looked like it was our staff that were, and it obviously it was a contractor. So I just think maybe a better descriptor. There's just sorry, Madam Chair. Second point I just wanted to bring up was well-being, and we haven't got anything here that talks about well-being. And I just think, Madam Chair, not trying to do a comment, but can you give us a update on well-being of staff, particularly since we've just gone through COVID and we don't have anything here that talks about well-being of staff?
So in terms of COVID, it's obviously been a significant issue, continues to be a significant issue for those people that work for us and those people that we serve. And certainly from an executive team perspective, using the resources that we have to ensure an adequate focus on well-being of staff is up there in the recovery plan actions. Certainly I can talk to during the COVID period, the enhanced focus that management had on connecting with staff, albeit recognising majority of staff were working virtually, working remotely, or maybe unable to work, given the constraints of the lockdown. So we had mechanisms in place to ensure regular staff contact and some toolkits to guide managers and others to as to what to look for in people, particularly when you're working remotely. Second of all, as we came back in from our recovery from level 4 down to level 1, there was particular focus in identifying those individuals whose role during COVID and the potential stress or distress that might have caused required more support to allow them to, I'm going to use the word decompress, give them some time to decompress following the incident, make sure that they had access to the wellbeing support through either the EIP scheme or the enhanced VTAI wellbeing program that we have, made sure that that was available to staff and utilised by staff, and we're proactively monitored the people that we had identified as having been under considerable strain, the extent to which they had been able to have some time to decompress and have some time away from the rigorous demands of council life at this time. We're very mindful that our people are not just coming in off the back of a challenging COVID, but they're coming in to a new financial year, coming into a 10-year planning process, and we're very mindful that that we've got to look out for them and create the conditions for them to succeed. So a summary answer would be clear processes and tools during COVID to make sure managers were connecting with individuals and looking out for things. Clear management action in terms of availability of EIP and VTAI, and some discretionary decompression time for those that had been most impacted by a prolonged COVID deployment.
So just to follow that up, where does it show us that in the dashboard?
Well, again, I'm happy to be responsive. I would have said that those are operational actions taken by management. But if my judgment's wrong, with this being my first time, I'm more than happy to happy to be guided.
Can I seek some clarification around what the councillor is actually asking for in the report? Mindful of the fact that we need to protect also people's confidentiality, and I think I've spoken on this before.
No, this is not about. This is about the general well-being of the whole staff through the COVID process. So I would have thought that was quite an important part of this, and I would have thought it would have been one of the boxes on here.
Okay,
So,
if I may just intervene here, what we'll do is take this piece offline, and I can work with you, Councillor Harper, to make sure the information that you want, and if it will be in the report. Are there any further questions? Thank you. Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 2 questions. One which I've just found peculiar. Incidents by activity. 13% of the incidents happen at the desk. What sort of incidents could you tell me? They happen at someone's work desk. Was they attacked by a pen or something? Or
Okay.
stapler?
Work incidents at desk. So one of the most important things at a desk, it might sound silly to you, but your back can't be used as a crane. So if you've got boxes or stuff beside you and you bend down to pick it up, you're not just picking. Even if it was a 2K or 3K box, it escalates up to around about 30 or 40 just because of your body position. You can't squat, you can't pull it close to you. There's a number of things like that. There's also workstation setup, which can affect the body and cause pain and discomfort, etc. There's a number of things that can happen around the desk that we've got to keep abreast of.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. And the other thing, the nature of injury, which I was surprised to see so high, electric shocks. Is that because of lack of maintenance, or is staff doing unusual things?
Now that one there was at the library, and the technician had a good look at it, took the cover off, and there was a lot of moisture and gunk behind the actual lift buttons. They suspect it has to do with our diligence around COVID cleaning, and there's been a build-up there. So to do a short-term fix, they've put a cover over the lift buttons. They'll be replacing the buttons with newer type buttons.
So that was more than one incident on the lift?
On here there was one incident on the lift, but there's been another one at the same site. So it's not in this report. So I've gone down and checked it all out. Same scenario.
Yeah, I was just surprised. Electric shock. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just really want to just get some clarity around the attrition rate for staff. The benchmark is set at 12%. This year you've reported 14.45% attrition, which is above that. So firstly, are there any concerns about that? Secondly, the suitability of the benchmark because of the organisation type, and are we completing exit interviews? Thank you.
So if you could just remind me, apologise, in the first part of the question.
Yeah, the first part is really around are there any concerns about the excessive numbers over the benchmark, suitability of the benchmark for an organisation of our type, and are we completing exit interviews, and what are the learnings from that? Thank you.
So on part one, as per the report, there's no undue concern around the attrition rate at this time. It's 2% above what historically we've seen in Palmerston North City Council, and given the change in economic climate, we're not unduly concerned at this time. In terms of the suitability of the benchmark, one of the wonderful things about local government is it's a really broad and diverse workforce segment. And if I was to look at industry standards, for example, in a contact centre, over 30% would be pretty normal. If I was to look at industry standards in construction, hourly rate workers where people will move work for an extra 50 cents an hour, again, you typically see attrition rates well over 20%. So I'm not, I think using our historical average at this point in time, while there might be some limitations in future, I think it's broadly there or thereabouts. In terms of the exit interviews, there is availability for exit interviews. My understanding at this time is that they are not mandated, and indeed we can't mandate that people give them. And unless one of my team has any particular insight to share on insight from exit interviews, I'd request that I bring that back. Wayne.
Sorry, just a point of clarity, Madam Chair. Are exit interviews being offered to staff who are leaving the organisation?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that's covered, so thank you. Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Patrick and Alan, for your report. In terms of the members of the pub, on page 15, we talked about some of those properties being placed on a dangerous property list. How many houses do we have on that dangerous property list, and how often are they updated, and what's the process around all of that?
At the moment, Armourguard has a list of houses and people that they identify as red flags. We are building the same sort of system at the moment, but I don't have the full details on that. I'd have to go to the source to find that out.
Okay. Okay. So I guess my question around that is, if somebody ends up going on to this being red flagged, how would they end up getting off the red flag system?
Well, I suppose if behaviour is showing up that they've been difficult or there's been threats to staff, etc., our role will be to be precautionary about it, and I suppose over a period of time, if behaviour was improved, they could be considered. But our focus has to be on looking after our staff and those who are working for us out there.
So is it possible to get sort of that info coming through this as well, so that we know, I guess, how many areas is technically dangerous in our region, in our city?
Madam Chair, we can look at information on the numbers of properties that are regarded as having a heightened risk. I can defer to one of my colleagues to find out what the exact operational processes for onboarding to that risk or offboarding to that risk are with a third party. I can honestly say that from a health and safety lens, I'm unclear and possibly haven't yet had the need to be clear on the operational processes that put people on or off a list. But I can defer to one of my colleagues and see what information we can bring back that's relevant to you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, I just want to give a warning that this report is going to be bigger than being here, but we have to think about the amount of resource and getting all this information, and if they're just one-offs, and I understand it's a balance, so we'll take some of these things away and have a look at it, and I think and if there's any disagreement, we might have to have a council workshop on it. But I am getting, the appendix on this is going to be getting quite big, so we've got to make sure what's relevant. I'm not cutting out information, but we do need to make sure what's relevant. Any further questions, Councillor Dingwall? No, you're right?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you, Patrick and Alan. 2 questions. My first question is around Table 5 in your report relating to critical incidents, and I'm just noting excavation, mobile plant, hand tools, working at height. There seems to be a theme of employees.
Sorry, Mr. Armstrong, could you speak up a bit?
There seems to be a theme of employees not following established protocols, and I just wonder if you'd comment on that.
Madam Chair, my experience of working or leading health and safety functions, I would say that the vast majority of time that incidents occur, they're happening because of human failures, not because of engineering or system failures. And absolutely the focus on any high resilient health and safety culture is in having our people behave, think and act in a way that is going to keep them and others safe. We are acutely aware of what we seek to achieve through formal training in terms of use of equipment, procedures, those types of things to make it safe. And we have a rigorous system of management at multiple levels, right down to the crew level, supervising the work on the ground. But as you correctly point out, where incidents occur, I would say 99% of the time it will be because there is a human behavioural failure. The practical steps that we take post-incident within the teams are for debriefs at all levels, right down to, as I say, the kind of crew leader working with the crew on the ground back up to identify how the situation came to bear, to identify whether there is a knowledge gap, to identify whether there is an engineering or a physical control gap, or to identify whether it is just literally the person choosing not to do the right thing, and how we can, through education and using the incident as an example, help them to understand the importance of following through on what they've been trained in, and if there was to be any persistent negligence, action that would be taken against them. So in answer to your question simply is it's almost always human failure, and our investigation and closeout procedure focuses on identifying the root cause of the failure and identifying how behavioural controls could be more effective in future.
Thank you. My second question relates to, has our health and safety system been audited by an external reviewer? What, if it is, what's the frequency and where are those results reported?
I will let Alan respond to this in the first instance.
Okay. From the documents I've seen since I've been here, there was an audit in 2017 and 2018. It was the one that one of the councillors referred to previously that was being monitored on closeout of actions. Yeah, so that's the latest ones. Previous to that, it was the ACC workplace safety management practices that audits were taking place, and when those stopped in 2016, a third party was engaged. Frequency at this stage was 2 years since the last. We have another organisation approaching us to do an audit. We're considering that at the moment.
Madam Chair, a number of the audit actions are still being implemented on as part of our programme to improve the health and safety resilience. And indeed this month, we're continuing to roll out some tools that help us better capture the information surrounding incidents, that better understand and have even higher trust and quality in the information we have around training and around incidents, and with a view to us being able to identify from trends anything that might be a particular focus for us in health and safety going forward.
Okay. Just a follow-up question. When would we expect that the next audit to be received at council?
My preference would be sooner rather than later. I mean, I'd love a snapshot or a baseline of where we're at right now at the early start of my tenure here. So I've just spoken to the person recently. I've got to look at his proposal, etc. But sooner rather than later, before the end of the year would suit me best. But again, that's
so, Madam Chair, if we can come back to you, the intention is there's a number of things that have slipped this year, a number of the routine things. We are actively looking at when we will initiate the next audit of our health and safety system as a relative priority, and then I'll be able to confirm with you when exactly it will be received by this committee.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Armstrong.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. That's clear. Thanks very much.
Councillor Rutherford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Harper covered off my question.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Alan. Welcome to Council, and thanks, Patrick. First question that I have is around the training area, and just trying to understand how good a grasp we have of our training needs in the health and safety area.
Okay, so there's before training starts, there is a needs assessment that takes place, particularly around roles, etc. So when someone comes into the organisation, I'm thinking of infrastructure right now. They're exposed to a number of risks and hazards. So therefore, the training's got to be completed. Competency needs to be identified, and it needs to be repeated according to whatever the standard is. So we have a system where we monitor through our cloud-based health and safety system called PeopleSafe. We monitor the volume of training that's going through every month, and we also can track if there's any overdue training that's been scheduled. So it's fairly robust. We did get a little behind during the COVID, but there's a catch-up process in place at the moment.
Thanks. So I guess, what would be helpful from my point of view would be to understand how well our training needs are actually being met, not just the numbers of activity. So would it, based on the reporting system that you've just referred to internally, would it be possible to get a summary report up that would actually speak to how well our training needs are actually being discharged?
Now we could get the numbers. The numbers is what we can pull up easily. If you're talking about the quality of the training, most of the training that's done through infrastructure is tied up to a standard. So the training quality has to be to a certain level for it to actually to occur. But we can produce the actual numbers on training that's taking place. If you're looking for something that's more subjective and feedback from those who are receiving the training, that would be a little bit different.
So Madam Chair, in one of the earlier requests was with specific reference to manual handling. My understanding of that request is it had previously been identified as an area of concern. There was previously commitment to training, and where we would seek to see the results of training is in a reduction in incident overall and a reduction in severity of incident. That, in very simple terms, that is what we're doing across all areas of health and safety. So again, we're still working with the system to make sure we're capturing the data, which allows us to identify trends. But ultimately, the effectiveness of health and safety training should correlate to a reduction in incident and a reduction in the severity of incident. As Alan said, for certain types of activity, particularly in the more critical risk area, the standard is not a PNCC standard. It is an industry standard, and there are specific requests around permitting or certifying people as competent before they can undertake the work. What we as an organisation do is look to correlate the training activity to the incidents and outcomes and identify where there are areas that require deeper attention. But training activity is immensely broad across as diverse an organisation as PNCC.
Thank you. That's covered. Any further questions, Councillor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, one further question. And it does relate to the earlier discussion around well-being, and just wondered, particularly Patrick, if you've got a view or awareness around how well-being information can be aggregated and reflected in a way that does, obviously protect the identity of individuals, but yet could give an organization at an organization level a view around how we're traveling for well-being?
Madam Chair, it's in any organisation, it's really difficult because many of the controls that we put in place were wrong. Many of the solutions that we put in place to help build resilient organizations, to help equip our people with an outlet where they can go when they don't feel they can use the management chain. Privacy is not just a factor between the council and what we report, it's a factor between the organisation and what's reported to us by third parties. So in every organisation I've worked in, there's a degree of subjectivity around how well we're going. Internally within the organisation, we do look at the number of use cases going through the likes of an employee assistance programme. We don't get detailed information on who the individual is, who the unit is. Anything that could identify the person doesn't even come to us because that would undermine the service. So that leads us to only a subjective analysis of how we're doing and well-being. And with all of its limitations, I can simply observe in the sort of 9 weeks, 10 weeks that I have been at council, I am seeing a workforce that is under significant pressure. I'm seeing a workforce that is, like many people in the community, having a 2020 to forget, and the executive team and managers are have a particular focus on trying to identify any single people or positions which are under a lot of stress, and making sure that we can act proactively to remind them of what tools are available to help them where we can. I'm not seeing an increase in I'm not seeing at this stage an increase in sickness leave, but again, the period during COVID is going to mask a lot of the standard reporting that I would normally have, because I can't say with confidence that everybody that was sick during COVID that wasn't working was taking sick leave. So I appreciate, Councillor, it's an unsatisfactory answer. I cannot, with the information that I have, I don't believe that there's really anything that could come here other than a subjective comment on well-being. But it's something that my colleagues in the executive team are asking me to think about how, even for our operational reporting, how we can do something that's a bit more structured on.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take my queries offline. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just a few questions to follow up. So in terms of our ACC experience rating, has that changed in the last 12 months?
Well, the experience rating, look, tell you the truth, I can't answer that. I don't even know what it is, so I can look into it.
Okay.
You're talking about the injury levels, etc. No, I don't know what it is.
Because so there's a loading that ACC either put on or give us a discount on depending on our injury rate, and so changing that can indicate to us that we've had more injuries than.
Excuse me, Councillor. Wayne will be able to answer that question.
Thank you. All right. So I'll move on then. In terms of worker participation in health and safety, can you give us an overview of how that's occurring?
Okay,
I don't mean the training, but I mean, in committees and that type of thing.
Yeah, so currently we have a couple of committees that are operational. They made up of probably 80% of health and safety reps. There's a set agenda they follow. Each rep brings a report from the area in. Issues are addressed, solutions are sought. So it's a reasonably good setup. We could do with more reps though. I mean, percentage-wise, there's an area we can do some work on, because the ratio should be 19 reps, for every 19 staff, 1 rep. So there's a bit of a gap there. So I'm aware of that, and I do realise that we need to do some work in that area. Frequency, is monthly for the health and safety rep meetings at this particular point in time.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Are there any further questions, councillors? There being none, thank you, gentlemen. You may step down. So I am happy to move the report. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Naylor, and we'll now open for comment. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I do have some comments. I don't want them to be taken as a reflection on any particular staff member, but they're more a reflection on our responsibility as governance to oversee health and safety for the employees and the contractors in the organisation. So I have a concern that we've gone a year before we've had a formal health and safety report to this committee, and I do hope that that will not happen again. I have a concern that the number of trainings has dropped off in the last 12 months if you compare it to the previous 12. Sorry, I haven't got a cover on my microphone, it's a bit dingy. We do need to make sure that we keep our eye on things like training numbers, because they are what are called lead indicators. So they tell us in advance whether we might be going to have a problem. Figures like the number of incidents and the number of lost work days, although useful, they're lag indicators, and they tell us after things have happened. So it's extremely important that the health and safety report contains both lead and lag information, not just retrospective look at what's happening, but actually what are we doing proactively to deal with things. I am concerned that a number of the indicators that we were tracking, and I mentioned them in my questioning, so things like the lost time days, the long-term injuries, the types of health and safety training, the actions that still needed to be addressed from the formal external review in April 2018, the investigations and the recommendations completed from previous investigations are all missing from this report. And myself and others have worked over the previous term of council, as I'm sure many of you will remember, to get these things added into the report. Now, noting the comments about we don't want to make the report too big, I thought you might be interested to know what the Institute of Directors recommends about routine reporting of health and safety to boards. So they recommend that the following data should be on the board's agenda. Data on all incidents, including near misses, work-related ill health, compliance with health monitoring programs and ACC claims. Data on absence rates due to sickness. Data on trends, including routine exposure to risks that are potentially harmful to health, such as excess noise levels, toxic chemicals, and bullying. Progress towards implementing formal improvement plans and meeting policy goals, including number of actions closed out on time. Actions in place aimed at preventing harm, such as training and maintenance programs. The health and safety performances and actions of contractors. Reports on internal and external audits and system reviews. Data on proactive safety visits, such as safety tours and workplace inspections. So given that, I think, I hope that staff have taken on board the need for a more comprehensive report and for it to be coming back to us quarterly. I do take seriously our responsibilities under the Health and Safety at Work Act to make sure that we're providing a safe employment situation for our employees. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any further comments? Councillor Rutherford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't repeat what Councillor Johnson said, but I do largely agree with her comments. We've got in front of us a human resources and health, safety and wellbeing report that's largely silent on wellbeing, and that does concern me a little bit. Investment in wellbeing is a preventative tool in the health and safety space, and I think we need to have confidence that we're meeting our legal obligations. So if anything, a more fuller report is desirable in my opinion, and I would like to see a process following this meeting where elected members can feed into what should be there, because I think we need to have total confidence in this, and it's not completely there for me at this stage. So I'm looking forward to seeing improvement in this space for the next report. Thank you.
Councillor Hapeta.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I think as governors of this organisation, it is our responsibility, as Councillor Johnson has said, for the health and safety, under the Health and Safety Act, to be responsible for that for this organisation. And I was disgusted that we didn't get any reporting for the wellbeing of the staff we did get a report on that, particularly after we've had this COVID incident. And that's what I was under this dashboard. There should have been some element of a report to come back to us about the wellbeing, even though Councillor Rutherford has just said that. So that's what I was trying to indicate in my questioning. So I was really upset that there wasn't anything or any indication, and then to be questioned to say that we were trying to get into the privacy of staff members. That is not what we were trying to do. It was just to get some indication and some kind of commentary to say, this is where we're sitting at as an organisation for the wellbeing of the staff. This is where they're at. This is the measurement. This is where it is now. This is where we want it to be. And this is where we're sitting at. So I do feel offended by that. And I do think that as governors of the organisation, we want to know where it's at. So we want to know where the staff are sitting at going forward. And we are concerned as governors going forward because we want to see the wellbeing of the staff being put foremost and going forward, that we want to see them going and that they are well going forward. That's where we are. We're not trying to sit into the privacy of the staff members.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I suppose much in the same vein, it does feel to me like we've had a real setback in the quality and the depth of the health and safety reporting, and it's come as quite a surprise actually, because the organisation and ourselves at Council have put a lot of work in over the last few years to actually build out the quality of that reporting, and so it's quite a surprise to see what showed up in this committee papers. It certainly endorsed the comments of Councillor Johnson and others around some of the areas for improvement, in particular emphasising the needs around training, but also making sure that we're not just looking at how much of it's happening, but really having a really good grasp on the efficacy of that training, because it's one of the upstream things that we can be doing around health and safety. And also, the comments around well-being, I think that we do need to find a way to actually get that through, and appreciate the work that other councillors are doing in that space and calling for that as well. I think it's essential, if we're going to be serious about discharging our duties, that we have some visibility in that space. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any further comments before I wrap this up? No. I'll take on board around process. I think it's absolutely critical that you as councillors have feed into the report, and there's obviously gaps in the report which we will make sure is filled next time round. So I'll work with the staff and we'll send an email out to work on the best process around that. And I'll also talk with you, Councillor Naylor, as the deputy, so that we can work together to make sure that the process, because this is a big one, we'll need some help on it. Okay, so we'll now go to vote. And Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
So that is carried 14 votes for, and I've missed. So it's carried. Yeah, and there's 2 against and 1 abstention. Just shot off the screen. So we'll now move on to our next item, which is item number 7, which is this Section 17A review of economic development. And we have Cheryl Bryant to present that.
Madam Chair, I'm happy to take this report as read and answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions, Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Cheryl. Can I ask, is it 15,000 for the full report, or is that just our share?
That is our share.
Okay, so when I entered council, when you wanted a report, it was 20,000. Now it's 30, I see. Is that just, have we gone to somebody? Have we gone to an open tender?
We have gone out to test that, and yes, that is the cost of the to undertake this piece of work.
So have we, sorry, Madam Chair, another question. So have we selected somebody?
Yes, we have. That work has not started because obviously there's a pending decision that needs to be made.
Okay.
Councillor Rutherford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Cheryl. Just a question around the process. because obviously this goes through the Joint Strategic Planning Committee with the terms of reference for the review. Is that correct?
The terms of reference for the Joint Strategic Planning Committee does not cover Section 17A reviews because this is a review of economic development activity. So and our economic activity is obviously contracted out to CEDA. So it is looking at that. So the Joint Strategic Planning Committee, while they have made a suggestion that they want to undertake a Section 17A review, it is each council's decision around proceeding with that review and also providing funding for it.
Okay, so if Manawatu District Council determine that they will not go ahead with a Section 17A review and will not commit funding, what happens then?
Then it wouldn't proceed. So we would have to have a discussion with them. It's the same happens here too. If this council decides not to proceed, we'd need to enter into some discussions with Manawatu District, given that we're joint shareholders of CEDA, which delivers our economic activity for both councils.
So we do require their consent essentially to proceed with that.
Each council could independently decide to review its economic development activity. How that proceeds would require some discussion with each council, given that both councils are joint owners of the of CEDA.
Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Similarly, a process question really, Cheryl, and following on from where Councillor Rutherford was. So the recommendation at Joint Strategic Planning came from a workshop. I suppose my question is why is Finance and Audit here the right place for that conversation about undertaking a review? Absolutely happy that it's the right place about the budget for the review.
So the reason why it's really come to finance and performance, part of it's for expedience sake, time is running out, but also to approve the budgets. And this is why this recommendation has to go to full council, because it's council who determines whether to undertake a Section 17A review. Just to come back to, if I may, through the chair, to respond to Councillor Rutherford's question more fully, is this council could independently decide to undertake a Section 17A review of its economic development activity, and it would be up to, it would have to take on all those costs of that if it did it independently, but it would need to actually have some conversations with its partner.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thanks for the report. I'm just trying to understand how much this review is actually required under the legislation versus council making a decision about whether it wants it. And I understand from the report the Section 17A review needs to happen no later than every 6 years. And reading in the 17A in the Local Government Act on page 23, it also talks under 2B in there that it needs to happen within 2 years before the expiry of any contract. So, and I'm no expert at interpreting all that, but is this essentially a requirement, or is it a decision for us to choose whether we go ahead with it or not?
It is a requirement to actually review activities every 6 years, but council can also determine to exempt those reviews.
Oh, okay. So there is an element of choice.
And I'm just, while I'm saying that, I'm just looking over at my expert, Andrew Boyle, who will nod or shake his head. And if he shakes his head, I'll be asking him to come up here and help me. But he's nodding his head that is the case.
Okay. Because if it was a requirement, I was sort of interested.
That's a comment.
Yeah, okay.
Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Cheryl. Where's the 15,000 going to come from? What budget?
That is why we have come to this committee, which we'll recommend to council, about an over expenditure. And when we come for approval of expenditure that is not in budget, then every attempt is made within the organisation to see that can wash up at the end of the year. However, we do need to be transparent about this. We have not provided for this in the budget.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Cheryl, the report mentions that terms of reference have been worked on. Obviously, there's a provider lined up. But what's the nature of the engagement at officer level with MDC?
So the nature of the engagement at officer level has been on the terms of reference and also on the provider itself. So the process we undertook around that, the terms of reference are pretty straightforward. They're from the Act, and the Act is quite limited in terms of what you can do around those reviews. In terms of the provider, given the time frame, and we went to the local government sector to find out what consultants had actually done this work before.
So we're seeking a financial provision here from this council. There will need to be one from MDC. At officer level, are you expecting a similar report to be on their agenda, or what's the story?
My understanding is the similar report is to formalise the request to undertake a Section 17A review. My understanding is that they can find that funding within their current budget.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Denison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to query around the scope of the terms of reference. Does it include tourism? And the reason I raise that is because back in 2016, we set up CEDA to cover both tourism and the economic development activity, and that's been split. I just want to understand what coverage are we getting around some of these other aspects, if any?
So it covers the full economic development activity that we have contracted out to CEDA, which covers economic development and tourism. So CEDA still provides the tourism services. They don't run the eyesight. The eyesight is an operation that came back into council. Most of the clientele around the eyesight were local residents. So it will cover their strategic role and their role as a regional tourism organisation.
Just a further question, Madam Chair, just around events. Are they doing any events for us?
They do events that are associated with their purpose. So they do the event around the Sorted Expo, agri-food, business events, but they don't undertake major events that were actually previously managed through that organisation where that was brought back in-house.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Cheryl. Just around the terms of reference that you referred to before as being based in the Act and quite straightforward. Just wondering when, if ever, they would become publicly available.
I mean, I'm happy to actually circulate those to all councillors, and they certainly would be publicly provided to any request under a Lagoima request. So there's nothing secret about those terms of reference.
So in terms of the decision not to append it to the report here, was there any, I guess, sensitivity around where we're at in the process now, or is it just that it wasn't appended?
No sensitivity around the terms of reference at all.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? There being none, thank you, Cheryl. We will now look at the recommendation moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Denison. Are there any comments? Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillors, I think it's really important that when we're spending this level of money, and I think it's well over 12 million over the period of 6 years that the organisation contracted to look after our economic development. And it was a good question by Councillor Denison, also the tourism aspects for us as a city and region, and also some events. I think the Manawatu Business Awards was another one that the officer missed, that they undertake for us. It's really important that we test that that the delivery of services is what we're expecting. I know we have an external board, but I think for that level of money, it's healthy just to understand that either we're heading in the right direction or we're not. So I'd hope you'd support an undertaking of the budget for that Section 17A review. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to support this recommendation, but just want to make a couple of comments about the fact that we're being asked to fund an unbudgeted amount, I guess the legislation that's been included in this paper outlines the expectations of a review, and we're only not required to if we believe that the benefits of undertaking a review do not justify the costs of undertaking the review. So I guess what I'm reading here is that there is a decision for council to determine whether to proceed with a review. And I don't believe that this council has had the appropriate time or place to even discuss that. And I'm assuming that has sort of been a decision that's been made offline by the fact that staff are progressing with terms of reference and undertaking someone to do this review. So in terms of process, I think deciding whether the review should be undertaken should be a decision that sits here at this table before a budget is being sought. And further to that, I do think if that's a likely possibility, it is something that we should be budgeting for in our 10-year plan. Obviously, the expectations of us considering whether to do a review are in legislation, so it should be, the assumption should be that a review will occur rather than the assumption being that it shouldn't occur. So it should be in our budgeting to begin with.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? Deputy Mayor.
Just to write a reply, Madam Chair. I think it's important to point out, and the report does, that the genesis of this did come from the joint strategic conversations that are open to all elected members. So this is not a piece of work that has just suddenly appeared. It is something that was raised at the Joint Strategic Planning Committee and was discussed with colleagues over in the district. So the Mayor is right. This is a significant amount of money that this council does invest around economic development. And in doing so, I think the timing is right for us to undertake this review. So I just wanted to, certainly from my perspective, indicate that this was something that was discussed with the district. It is a regional approach, and it's important that it's undertaken.
Councillor Denison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My comment is just around the unbudgeted amount. When we come to do the long-term plan, I believe we should actually have a funding line for Section 17A reviews. It doesn't necessarily have to be defined what we review each year, but I think we should have a rolling tranche of reviews, and so therefore I think advocate for that when we get to that decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly a comment around terms of references and when we do or don't append those and include those, and certainly from my perspective, we do have a commitment at a council level reflected in much of our undertaking with the community around transparency. And I think in cases where there isn't sensitivity, my preference would be the default is that we do append those and make those available to the community. I think it just sort of heads things off rather than letting the community sit back and wonder what may or may not be in a terms of reference. And so my plea going forward would be for council staff, when we are looking at other activities that have terms of reference attached to, as in this case, there isn't any sensitivity with them, that we go ahead and make those available at the earliest possible instance to the community, so that we are following through on our commitments around transparency. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. You've already spoken, Councillor. I'm happy to vote now in things of time. So we're going to go ahead with the vote. And Mr. Armstrong? So that is carried unanimously. We will now move on to item number 8, which is on page 25, and we have Kathy Diva-Todd presenting. And that's the reserve land acquisition for Whakarongarang Greens Road.
Your Worship, Councillors and Mr Armstrong, the report that you have in front of you really looks at some strategic opportunities that have come up that weren't anticipated in the asset management plan, the long-term plan, or any subdivisions that we had before us. The first, the Whakarongo Lagoon escarpment process provides council with an opportunity to enhance the amenity value of that area by making sure that the whole escarpment is included and planted in a consistent way. It also aligns very closely with the actions in the biodiversity plan, and that it adds to the biodiversity of the area. The land itself is intended by the owners of the property to be gifted to council, and so the cost of purchase really relates to the subdivision and the legal costs. However, there is relatively large operational funding associated with this purchase, estimated to be $10,000 per year for 3 years and $8,000 ongoing. The land itself, while the escarpment we consider to be stable, there is a lot of weed and pest in there at the moment, and we will be required to completely replant that area. The second opportunity at Greens Road, and you've already heard public comment on this morning, really formalises an informal pedestrian path that exists at the moment that was developed as part of the wind farm development that's ongoing at the moment. It links a very important recreational, well-used path that takes people between Kahutarawa and Tiratia Road and around Arapuki Forest Park. So it has very strong strategic alignment with the asset management plan we have currently and the active community plan. Now, in contrast to what it says in the report, we have actually found some savings in another program, so we can accommodate within their existing budgets the purchase of both properties. But this report is in front of this council because it is an asset that council hadn't anticipated buying, so we do need a council resolution on buying the properties and also an understanding of council that we are committing to ongoing operational costs in doing so.
Thank you, Kathy. Open for questions. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Kathy, for the report. First, around the Whakarongo Lagoon, just the picture on the bottom of page 31 sort of shows the new roundabout, lovely new roundabout there on James Line, and just how it sort of interfaces with that area. So I'm just trying to understand, does that end up forming a road out through that, or does that just become sort of a parking area that accesses a recreational asset there?
Sorry, are you referring to the orange area? Which?
The picture on the bottom of page 31. I guess I'm just trying to understand how the road and parking ends up interfacing with that recreational area in the longer term.
Right. Okay. So the area that we have there that's proposed to be gifted to council is all escarpment. So it's not level land. The road coming in will be a normal road access, and we will have pedestrian access into there. The walkway and reserved land will be in the current subdivision that is in front of council for Whakarongo, which hasn't been confirmed yet. This is really just to secure the amenity value of that escarpment by securing the last part of that. So it forms a backdrop. It doesn't provide a recreation opportunity in its own right. The access into that area will be through a roading asset down the footpath.
Great, thank you. And just noting the generosity of the owners there, I would assume that something would be done to recognize that in terms of the sorts of things that councils might do.
Yes, certainly recognition of that, not only in the gifting, obviously, which will be recorded on the title and how council acquired the land, but certainly we will do some communication and promotion around that.
Great, thank you. And moving now to Greens Road, just briefly. I guess just really interested in the sort of wider view around that area. We've got a real gem at the end of the road. We're talking about creating a nice further recreational opportunity at the junction between Greens and Kutarawa, and sort of longer term views around, I guess, connecting the dots, as it were, and making sure that there's sort of appropriate access and safety there, noting that we're creating quite a footpath easement or access along this area, but Kutarawa Road itself is quite notorious for not having much by the way of road safety or amenity about it.
Councillors, you have a workshop that is on the schedule for consideration of Kutarawa and the environment.
Are there any further questions?
I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Just to clarify, Kathy, you mentioned that you have now found some budget through savings.
Yes, councillors, we have the Outdoor Recreation Reserves Arapuki Kutarawa development program, $65,000 for capital developments in this current year. That area does include the Greens Road Kutarawa Tiratia area. So we've actually managed, we've been looking at an extension to that car park, and we've just had our prices come in for that extension, and it's come in lower than we had anticipated. So we'd be proposing to use that, that surplus for purchase of the land.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. That clarifies that. So, Councillor, no further questions. So, thank you, Kathy. You may step down. So, we will go to the recommendations, and that means, Natalia, could you please change recommendation number 5 and take out unbudgeted, just the word unbudgeted. Councillors, all the recommendations are not on the screen, so can you just go by your agenda, but we can't fit them all on the screen. So do I have Councillor Naylor's move? Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Are there any comments while we wait for changes? Councillor Johnson and then the Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just that I do support this. I think we need to be flexible in taking up these opportunities when they're offered to us as a council. At the moment, we're struggling with completing the Riverside Walkway to Ashurst because of difficulty in acquiring either an easement or a piece of land to complete the walkway. Here we've got quite the opposite opportunity where we've got owners of land who have generously either gifted or been prepared to sell to us land that would enable access for recreation or to enhance biodiversity. And I think despite the fact that these were not anticipated and therefore not budgeted for in terms of ongoing expense, that would be foolish to turn down these offers at this time, particularly when we consider the amount of development that's happening at Whakaronga Way. We need to be proactively securing green space and particularly green space that's of good biodiversity value. So I think that this is quite a good opportunity that we should take, even despite the small amount of ongoing expense required to maintain the land. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think, like Councillor Johnson, we should take up this opportunity. I want to thank the officers for bringing it forward and actually for finding some of the money as well. That's always a bonus. And I do think that both areas, Whakaronga is becoming more built up, and now's the time to do this work or acquire this land to enable that, enable those pathways and everything to fall into place. It's really hard to retrofit it, and unfortunately that's what's happening at Ashurst, and I'm sure there's going to be some ongoing challenges there. With the other one at Greens Road, the Te Ara Roa Trust, I mean, that is something of significance, that pathway, and it's actually been just a few officers and a few individuals that have really kept pushing that forward. I don't think many other metro cities have that national pathway running through the middle of their city. So we should take up the opportunity there, and I think with the Arapuki Park and everything up there, that is one of our undiscovered gems, really. And I think, again, really good work. I hope you support this. And again, just well done to the officers. And I do think we should acknowledge the gifting somehow, more than just a bit of profile. I think that's certainly a start. But the gifting of this land to us, I think, should be acknowledged in some way. And perhaps the officers could have a bit of a think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in regards to having the workshop come in on this whole recreational area, I just wanted to ensure that the public comment that was made today, those type of views and aspirations for the area were included somehow when we're starting to develop the thinking going forward. That's what I was wanting to mention. Thank you.
Noted. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and yeah, very supportive of both of these. Anything that gives us more mountain biking options in the city, always good, and the other one more bird watching opportunities. So really, it's a fantastic initiative to see this come forward, and I think again the generosity and noting the generosity of the community, particularly around the lagoon, is something that we should take seriously as a council. The primary comment I wanted to make was just around the Kahutarawa area, obviously already a destination for those within and beyond the city from a recreational point of view. This is beginning to add yet another reason to head up that road. Some people will choose to do that at speed, and we need to be quite conscious of meeting the wider needs for access and road safety in that area, and do look forward to the workshop that's coming. But the more demand we put on this one narrow road, we're also creating a need for ourselves to also address the wider challenges around transport and access there. So look forward to those discussions in due course.
Thank you, Councillor. So that's the end of comment, councillors. So we will now go to vote. And Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
So that is carried unanimously. So now we will break for morning tea, and please be back at 10:45. Can I just go back? Yeah, no. Can I go back to that? I was just, as you came in, I was just going to say, well, all people had all